The ocean air stung their faces. The sun dropped down into the horizon, bathing the new world in a wonder of fire. It seemed as though every inch of land ahead was burning at that very moment. They had heard stories about this place, about their leader's mission, and some began to grow weary of the quest. As they disembarked and headed for shore, turning back to see the hulking frames of the wooden sailing vessels by which they had just traversed the ocean, their instincts propelled them to head back to board once again and seek safety on the open ocean rather than the tropical mountains spanning the distance, all in the fire of the sun. When they had made landfall, set up camp, they were instructed about their mission. What they were facing had never been seen before. There were natives, Aztecs they were known as, and they were fierce. What the Spaniards brought couldn't match that intensity and the familiarity of the land. Some of the men in this legion planned to slip away at night, head back to their ship, and make sail for Spain. Their leader, someone who would become known as one of the most ruthless conquerors of all time, decided on another plan. He had the ships torched at sea. The men gaped in horror as their only escape from this unknown place burned before their eyes. Now courts had their full attention. At that moment they had no choice but to move forward. There was no escape. There was no retreat. That might seem to be a fascinating story for some, but that's all it is, right? Just a story, some history that doesn't really affect people here and now. It's certainly not going to have any direct impact on the working class people of today. Or is it? The entrepreneurial retreat. I want you to think about something for a moment. If you were one of those Spanish conquistadors, soldiers, if you will, standing on that beach, and if you thought your vicious leader was somewhere else entirely, that he would never be wiser for your escape because you figured he would soon find the wrong end of a blade, how would you feel with that option to slip away and make it back to the ship? You might have had 10 other men agreeing to make this escape with you. 10 men could sail across the sea if they had to. It would be a bit of a comfort, wouldn't it? It sure would be to me, and I don't even sail. Now imagine standing there with your plan, facing the unknown and near certainty of death, failure, or slipping back to the safety of the sea. Much better odds of survival. There's almost no choice, really. Sure, they could be captured, they could be hung, but they could also land somewhere else, slip into the world, and be forgotten. If you suddenly saw that safety net, that other option turn to ash and flame before your eyes and slowly sink off the coast, you'd suddenly realize you had no choice left. Why do I tell you this? Let's think about the historical importance of Corpus burning those ships. He knew his men. He knew their fare. This was a new world, new savages they had never seen before. They had been beaten back time and time again already, and these new reinforcements weren't instilling much confidence in him. He knew as long as they had a retreat, as long as they had an escape, they would hold on to it. They would grasp onto it. They would enter battle, or at the least the leading edge of the rainforest, with the mindset that if things turned bad, and they probably would, they could simply run back to the ships and get away. No, Corpus wouldn't have it. He needed to have his men fighting as though there was no other option but to succeed. For them, it was true. What does it feel like when the entrepreneur has an escape route? She begins to set up her business a bit tentatively perhaps, but it's moving along well enough. She keeps thinking about all of the what-if scenarios that play in her mind late at night, while she's trying to chase down those elusive seas. What if no one likes my ideas? What if I can't make any sales during that first year? What if I can't get the financial backing? What if I don't know enough? I could go on and on with what-if situations, but if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, you've likely already discovered them for yourself. Every single what-if is another doorway through which to escape. There are 2 reasons people conjure up what-if scenarios. The first is because they don't want to fail. They think about everything that can go wrong, and that helps justify making their way back into the water under the cover of night. What if I can't get this thing started? Okay, then I'll just stay with the job I have for now. What if the market I think is there for it isn't really there? Okay, then maybe I'll just keep researching this thing a little longer. What if someone else already has the same idea? I don't want to go up against someone who may know more about it than I do. Okay, then I'll keep trying to think of something better. Do you see what happens when you have an escape route? It becomes much easier to begin taking that route. It becomes much more tempting to simply turn back and not even bother trying. If the Spanish had slipped away that night instead of having their ships burned, Latin America would look a lot different than it does now. Maybe that would be better, maybe it would be worse. We can't rewrite history, but what we can say is that, had those men not lost their escape plan, they never would have pushed forth, especially not as hard as they could after the first battle for them commenced. The coming new world. Your life is going to change. Make no mistake about it. If you're an entrepreneur or even a small business owner who has taken that first step, your life will change. You may be scraping by financially right now. You could be feeling as though you are losing your footing. Those things happen. They happen to all of us. How do you think the world of personal computing, smartphones, and tablets would look like today if Steve Jobs had decided to pack it in after the first few failures? Well, we still might be waiting for the first smartphone, tablet, or MP3 player. I'm sure someone else would have developed it, but not quite like Apple. Steve Jobs had an escape route, but he never chose to look at it. Far too many of us budding and aspiring entrepreneurs do though, and it's a dangerous thing. The moment you begin focusing your attention and energy on those escape mechanisms, you're giving yourself a reason to fail. Stop doing it. Burn your ships, take them out of the picture. Give yourself only one way to get from point A to point B, which is where you are now, and your ultimate goal. Just imagine what thought process you might have in the previous examples if you didn't have any other choice but to keep pressing forth. What if I can get this thing started? Sit down and read. Ask other entrepreneurs. Find a way to get your idea off the ground. What if the market I think is there for it isn't really there? Do your research. Test the market. Make the market if you need to. Do you think there was a market for personal computers when Steve Jobs started? Oh no, there wasn't. He made it. What if someone else already has the same idea? I don't want to go up against someone who may know more about it than I do. This is competition. Even if your idea is so unique no one else has ever thought of it, someone will try and ride your coattails. Don't let that stop you. Get tough. As I mentioned, things are going to get tough at times for you as an entrepreneur. When that happens though, the best entrepreneurs dig in, hunker down, and work through the plan. They never ever look back from where they came. Will you succeed? I can't say. I just don't know. What I can say, though, is that when you toughen up and burn your ships, you leave yourself no other choice but to succeed. It can be the most terrifying thing for some, but you'll be forging the steel of your life in the process, and that, my friends, is some of the toughest material you'll find anywhere in the world. Published July 29, 2015.